Welcome into the Blurred Wire. It is your host, King Whale, and we are talking, and I'm here with my co-host, Ty. If you want to say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
Hello, people. And not to the apes, to the people.
Or should I? I was
Oh,
about
were
to
you
say,
gonna
or
take
should I
that?
say apes?
When I said apes, yes. So that's because we are reviewing Rise of the Planet of the Apes in preparation for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that's coming out on May 10th. Um, that's only in like 2 or 3 weeks, right? Right?
It's pretty. It's
Pretty
pretty
soon.
soon. It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
soon. I think
Okay.
it's in May something. I forget.
Okay. Well, yeah, so we are breaking down kind of what we thought about this movie. We're going to try to get through all of them before the new one comes out, and then we can go right into the new one, and then we will go into the Mad Max saga. But, that's still a few weeks from now. But right now we're talking about Rise of the Planet of the Apes. So I guess we will just dive right in.
Dive
What
right
are
in.
you thinking after watching this movie? Because you just watched it like a few minutes ago, right?
Yes, and for the first time ever,
For the
I've
first
I've
time.
never
Okay.
I've never seen this movie before, and
Okay.
I enjoyed it. I was surprised. I had my first exposure to the series was the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes movie, which I remember really hating as a kid for some reason. I just maybe I didn't like Mark Wahlberg. I don't know what it was,
I think
but
that's fair.
I didn't like it. And so I liked the slower pacing.
Hmm.
I like the more emotional moments with this album, this movie. I thought it was I really loved like the moments of silence that we got. There's a
Oh yeah.
surprising like lack of dialogue in this movie, and it really shows how good of an actor Andy Serkis is when you put him in a mocap suit to still be able to convey so much emotion without speaking. And then when he does speak, it's powerful. Like,
Oh yeah.
dude did amazing mocap work here.
I think that's a theme that we can continue on because now that you just mentioned that, because I've seen Dawn and War recently, because I had saw Rise a long time ago, but I rewatched it again today just to kind of get ready for it. And I think that's a theme that I didn't realize that the silence, there's a lot of
Hmm.
silence, and these movies try to say a lot without it's not even saying a lot without saying a lot. There's just a lot of silence. A lot
Yeah.
of places, and sometimes it's in places where it seems like dialogue will normally be. Like it almost feels like an uncomfortable silence, but it's like an uncomfortableness that's necessary for the story. You know what I mean? Because it's
Hmm.
like it feels like most directors would put dialogue here. Like, it feels like something should be talking here, especially if you
Yeah.
compare it to Planet of the Apes. Every scene was dialogue. There was someone talking in literally every single scene. So
Right.
I think the absence is really good. I wish I had picked up on that initially. Well, when we go through this, we'll kind of look more at it. But I think the
Yeah.
silence is a very powerful thing in this movie.
Because I know just offhandedly that later through the series they all begin talking more as the apes begin to build their own
Hmm.
civilization. So I'm curious to see how that kind of like grows throughout the series, if that gets like
Hmm.
steadily more pronounced or how that'll ring. But I really loved it. I will say I was surprised. This is way more Andy Serkis's movie than it is James Franco's.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
From like watching a trailer beforehand, I was not expecting there to be, I thought there was going to be way more James Franco. Not that there isn't a good amount. It's just this really is Caesar's story.
Yeah.
And I thought it was handled really well.
hmm I think when films do, because like a lot of times when films are exploring new characters and stuff, I've even heard that like the new Knuckles show that's coming out on Paramount Plus. A lot of times people will complain that the human characters are getting too much time. Like the show is called Knuckles, and apparently
Hmm.
it focused a lot on, well, try not to spoil it for anybody, but that was one of the complaints that it focused a lot on the human characters. People say
Hmm.
the same things about like Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or even the Godzilla and Kong, like we talked about. Like sometimes they
Hmm.
focus on the humans so much when it's not the interesting part of the story. And I feel like Rise of the Planet of the Apes does not have that problem.
Yeah.
They do not have that problem. They focus on exactly what they need to. And I have to reference because I know you said that. So your first introduction to Planet of the Apes was the Mark Wahlberg one in
Yeah.
2000. So when I found out that that was released in 2001, I
Hmm.
almost threw up because I watched the film when I was a little kid. I was like 6 or 7, so I don't know who Mark Wahlberg is and all these other people. So I have no, I thought it came out like 50 years before I was born. Well, now when I look back, I thought it came out, I thought it was like an 80s movie. Like the way Tim Burton directed it, it seemed very much so like an 80s movie. And now that I know that it came out in this century, it's like that's one that we should probably just pretend didn't happen.
Yeah, because that's the one that has is that the one with Paul Giamatti
Um,
as one of the apes?
one of I know
He's like the is it orangutan?
the big mean ape. I don't know if it's Paul Giamatti. I know the main ape is played by Tim Roth, who plays Abomination in the MCU, the one who's like mean, the general who hates humans.
Uh-huh.
And then the ape that Mark Wahlberg like falls in love with is played by Helen Bonham Carter. And like I remember at the end of the movie, we were as kids like sitting there watching it, and then he kisses the human character, which makes sense, and then he kisses the ape, and we as kids were like, "Ew,
Why is he kissing
why
an
did you
ape?
do that?" And my mom was like, "Well, he had the beauty and the beast." What she said. You ask her to this day, she will
That
remind you about it.
that's something your mom would say.
Yes.
I can
She's
see
like,
it.
you gotta have the beauty and the beast. She
But
would literally repeat that joke for years after that.
but fortunately, there's no humans kissing apes in
No, yes.
Rise.
Yes. Let's talk. Yeah, let me get
Very
back to the
very
movie that we need to
thankfully,
talk
there's
about.
no human
Yeah.
ape romance.
I feel like this movie did a great job just adding, first of all, taking it all the way back and letting us see like how a planet like this could become was
Hmm.
very interesting. Because the premise of Planet of the Apes is still interesting, of like, what if apes were the dominant species and humans weren't? That
Hmm.
part in and of itself, it's an interesting thing to explore.
Yeah.
But what that movie was missing was realism. And partly that was Tim Burton style, but partly it's just hard to believe that like it could happen. But in Rise of the
Hmm.
Planet of the Apes, like while it is still a sci-fi movie, while we know it's not going to happen, it had realism in it. It felt realistic. It felt like which gave it stakes, which made us care more about everything that was going on in the story.
Hmm.
And actually, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think I agree with you there. It's kind of hard to watch at moments, and I don't know if this is just a me and my own sensitivities or what, but I mean this movie kind of focuses on like the cruelty of animal testing,
Hmm.
and it's really gross watching it. I hate seeing animal cruelty
Yeah.
put on film. And so but I feel like it's important for us to be able to empathize with Caesar, with him as the protagonist, if they're just trying to survive, because they're like the text of the movie is framing it as, look at how horrible people have been treating these these apes. James Franco's character is very kind to Caesar at times and
Hmm.
in raising him, but he's an outlier. He is not the rule here.
And even though he's very kind, like he's still taking part in the testing. Like,
Hmm.
Caesar wasn't the only ape. Bright Eyes wasn't the only ape that was tested. It was just the only ape that was successful. But like
Right.
there was probably been dozens and dozens of apes, and even beyond apes, other animals that have been tested on. And I thought it was very interesting because like as Caesar gets older, and we'll see it more throughout the trilogy, but at least in this film, as he meets these other apes and like finds people that are his kind, he quickly assimilates, not assimilates, it's probably not the right word, but he quickly recognizes like these are my people and I want to protect them. Even
Hmm.
after one ape came after him and beat him in a way that no human has, because like a human didn't really beat him as bad as that other ape did. But
Hmm.
Caesar was able to be like, "Hey, no, we cannot be fighting each other." He was able to
Right.
see who the real enemy was, despite that.
Right.
And I think it was powerful how he did not blame James Franco's character for all the
Mhm.
testing that he did on animals. I feel like he kind of he we could see him like kind of chalk it up to like he didn't know better, but he still freed all those people from James Franco's lab. Like all these apes are going and we're gonna go live in the forest. And he freed a
Right.
lot of them from the zoo. Like he was like, you're not doing this anymore. I'm not gonna blame you for what you did, but we are escaping and getting out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something I like about like portraying Caesar's intelligence as it kind of evolves throughout the movie, that it's like it feels like his character is able, and like the apes, as they're gaining intelligence, they're recognizing violence not just in like the physical act of violence, but in like the things that can create like control, power dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
things that can create that lead to violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it feel like, and it's crazy because we're talking about an ape as like a character, and it feels, interesting to watch this after watching uh Kong X Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
um because we see a lot of effort trying to make King Kong empathetical, uh, as a character, trying to give him characteristics. And I feel like that's a movie that did it really poorly. And I feel like this is a movie that's doing like a very similar thing much better. Like
Yeah.
I empathize with Caesar. I want him to succeed at the expense of the evil humans in this world. Like, yeah, go, dude. Get to the redwoods.
Well, I think the thing that's and I think what really emphasizes it for me is because I feel like people want to show Kong's character growth from his interactions with humans. Like the more that Kong is around humans, the more human he is and the more character growth we get. This is
Hmm.
the exact opposite. The more that Caesar is around his own kind, the more character growth and depth we get from Caesar. All the
Hmm.
way to the scene where James Franco bails he bribes his way to get Caesar out of that horrible facility he was in. And Caesar's like, no, I'm gonna stay and help my people. And
Right.
like that, he just closed the cage. And again, that didn't surprise us. Like even seeing it for because I saw this movie a long time ago and seeing it again, I wasn't even surprised that he closed the door and didn't want to go back because I knew he was on that mindset of I'm gonna fix this and I'm gonna get all these guys out of here. And I feel like that's the by spending more time on Caesar's character with the apes and allowing him to grow is why we have a better dynamic with this character than we do with, compared to Kong.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's this with Caesar, when he's interacting with his fellow apes before he's given them the 113 to, to give them increased intelligence, more cells that are growing. Um we see it almost feels like whenever he's attacked by his fellow apes, it feels like you just don't know better. Like
Hmm.
it feels like you just like you're just acting on instinct right now. And then if we compare like moments of violence against people, you can see that he's in like there's intentionality. Like human aggression portrayed in the movie is so it's very out of its way,
It's
and
calculated.
it's very calculate, yeah, it's unnecessary, and it's cruel. It's like for joy. Way more than we see with the apes and them interacting. And I really love how that's portrayed, and it's all portrayed like largely without words.
Mhm.
Like it's these quiet moments, and I think that's skillful as a director to be able to frame shots that way to still carry that message away without dialogue.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the human, cruelty is shown to display like they get joy, but it's also shown as like dominance, as like they feel like they are the dominant species because technically we are. But
Hmm.
and that makes people to act in a way that's it's kind of an interesting dynamic because it's almost like the guy that's torturing the apes, or the guy that
Hmm.
lives on it, like he likes messing with them and stuff, and he lives in the reserve. It's like if
Hmm.
that looks like someone who hates apes, and it's almost like if you hate apes so much, why do you work with them?
Right,
like it
exactly.
doesn't make sense for him to be here. But then when you realize it's more about ego and dominance, he's there because he feels dominant and wants to dominate over apes. So he's missing something in his life to where he can only feel like a king when he comes into work and can, like, make sure these apes know who's boss. So it's not about hating them, it's about having a need and a twisted desire to dominate.
Right. Right, because violence isn't something that's used for like social purposes to say like, hey, don't do this behavior. Like as soon as the apes gain intelligence, they stop using violence with each other for socialization purposes
Mhm.
because they are able to communicate with more effective means to be able to coordinate and then enact their plans. Like it's very, I don't know, it's really cool. It's really cool
Yeah.
to see. And I think I wasn't expecting much
Mhm.
from a Planet of the Apes movie, but I
That's
think
fair.
and
That's
and I
fair.
and I, as much as I talk it up, I don't think it's like incredibly deep in anything. Like I don't think this is like a shining testament of
Mhm.
of
Filmmaking.
yeah, a thematic like how we treat animals as a reflection of who we are as people. But for something I was expecting more just for action and a good time was more impressive than I was expecting. So I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And
And
I
I
think
think,
there's a lot of room for it to grow as the
yeah.
series continues, and I'm excited to see how that pans out.
And like I almost feel like you can't really want action with this movie because like if you only want this movie for action, you're not going to get it because there's not
Hmm.
much action in it. Because it's more about the story and the growth of Caesar. Like you're going to get some scenes, of course, like the last scene, and it was really good and a lot of action. But again, most of these movies, I'm a guy who loves movies with lots of action. You already know that.
Hmm.
And especially filmmakers that are able to tell stories by using breakneck action, like what Joe Russo and Anthony Russo did with Civil War and Infinity War, how they told the story through just action, action, action.
Hmm.
But this kind of movie, it didn't need it, and it feels like they understood. Like those movies required it. You had a lot of characters to juggle. You had to keep things moving along. This movie really didn't require it. And like I said, it felt like it not only did it feel realistic, and again, the bar for Planet of the Apes, this might be the first like good Planet of the Apes movie ever.
Hmm.
So, when you're comparing it, it's like there's nowhere to go but up.
Yeah.
But even just stacked up against any other sci-fi movie, I feel like it holds up probably more than most, especially a when you have a topic or a concept that can so easily turn into parody and
Hmm.
and stupidness, for lack of a better word, just
Yeah.
plain stupid. It does a good job of keeping itself grounded, which I think
Yeah.
is very, very impressive. And he in
Yeah.
and Matt Reeves keeps that up through the sequels.
Yeah, for all of like the sci-fi-ness of it, it doesn't feel corny. Like I
Exactly.
never feel it as corny when I'm watching it. And two, like it feels like a really tight movie. Like there's not a scene that feels like too drawn out. It doesn't feel like it
Hmm.
overstays its welcome. Like I feel like honestly by the end I thought it could have gone on a little bit longer. Like I was like, "Oh, I could watch this a little bit more."
Yeah, I kind
And
of
I
felt
don't
that
know
way
if
too.
that's just from, movies nowadays. They feel like we're hitting like more 2+ hour run times. And so to have a movie that's like an hour 40 is just kind of refreshing.
Yeah.
And like, no, nope, we're an hour 40-minute movie. We're gonna stay right here. That's all you need.
Yeah, and there were and it's one of those movies that doesn't really feel like it has a whole lot of plot holes either throughout the entire film and throughout how it sets up the sequels. Like there's not really a whole lot of things where I'm like, that's not really realistic, or like I can't really see that happening. Nothing like I'm sure there's something, but nothing like immediately comes to mind. And like for
Mhm.
me, I don't even think I have like a down point. It doesn't mean like it's so
Mhm.
good it just doesn't have a down point because it was a solid movie. It wasn't like incredible, but it's like I just don't really like. I didn't have any cringe moments. The only thing I can think of is that Stephen Jacobs, who's played by David Oyel, oh, David O. I shouldn't try to pronounce his name. I'm gonna mess that up so badly. Um, he's a little over the top when we get to the end, kind of falls into like that villain trope, like, "Ah, you stupid ape," when he gets like
Mm.
thrown off in the helicopter and thrown into the water. But again, I feel like that's only okay because we didn't spend too much time with James Franco. We didn't spend too much time with the humans. We spent a lot of time with the apes. So like his like descent into like villainy didn't really feel as corny or anything because it's not really his story. It's not a human story. It's Caesar's story.
Yeah, I will say that some of the human supporting cast either feel kind of like pointless to be there, or if they are there, it feels like they're really not there doing much. But I feel like the movie wasn't really built for them to do much. Like
Hmm.
you're saying, like it is Caesar's story. At the end of the day, it kind of feels like they're there more so to flesh out like the world as a whole, and explaining how like, oh, this disease is going to be spreading now, like the whole like thing with the neighbor and one of the animal handler. Like I feel like they could have probably been cut from the movie for Caesar's story and been fine
Been
without it.
fine, yeah, yeah.
But um but for like the greater like world as a whole, I understand why they probably did. But it does leave me feeling like, okay, we couldn't have done anything more interesting with that. Like
With them, yeah.
this is the best we came up with, but
I think
but
that's
nothing
one.
too serious.
And I think that's one thing that's interesting about this too, because it used to kind of annoy me when movies would be like set in the same world, but like use completely different actors, if that makes sense, because like it feels like
Hmm.
it's not in the same world again.
Hmm.
And throughout these three trilogies, none of the human actors return.
Hmm.
Everybody is there for a movie and then they move on. And
Hmm.
like at first, like I said, that was kind of annoying, but actually looking back at the trilogy, I as a whole, especially after rewatching this movie, that's kind of its strength because again, you are following the apes. It's like in a if the roles were reversed and this was like humans in a movie and like apes were kind of the other thing, you wouldn't expect like to have the same ape actors, you know what I mean, in each movie, if that makes sense. Like you wouldn't really expect to be like to see the exact same. And so it's kind of reversed in that way. It keeps the
Yeah.
focus where it should be. And I feel like that's why the movie works so well because it's not trying to and it's not and again, I think my favorite part is that Caesar develops human traits away from humans
Yeah.
because I mean it shows James Franco like raising him, but again, that's done as a montage. We don't really
Hmm.
see him exude some of those human qualities until he's with his other apes, with his other chimps. And I think that's where this movie succeeds, where a lot of movies that try to give animals human characteristics often fail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
no notes. Like that really that's
Yeah,
how I
that
feel
covered
too.
it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
So
sums up pretty good.
have you seen Dawn or War yet before?
Not yet,
No.
but I'm
Okay.
excited for our next episode to be able
Yeah.
to talk about Dawn,
Hmm.
the Empire Strikes Back of
Of
these
the of the
of this
Planet of the Apes
trilogy.
movies. So yeah, so for anybody listening, if you are even considering going to see Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, definitely watch these three. You still
Hmm.
got time. Make it
Yeah,
into a weekend or something. Do them one
watch
week
them
at a
along with
time.
us.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Watch them along with us, because it really will help build out the world and give you more appreciation for what's going to happen in Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. So,
Yeah.
yeah, just keep up with us, keep following. Make sure you like and subscribe. As we get through this, of course, if you have a movie that you'd really love to see us cover or talk about too, feel free to drop that as well. We still like listening to what people have to say. And if you saw Rise of the Planet of the Apes, let us know your thoughts. Let us know in the polls, in the comments. What did you think? Whether you liked the movie or didn't like the movie. If it's your thoughts, we want to hear them.
Hmm.
Thank
Until
you
next
guys.
time.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. Until next time.